The smell of fresh borscht stayed inside the van long after we had left the shelter. For the first time in weeks, the drive didn't feel quite as heavy. Maxim balanced the container carefully on the dashboard while we waited at a temporary checkpoint. If someone told me a month ago that homemade soup would become the highlight of my day, he said, smiling, I would have laughed. I think we've all changed. He nodded without taking his eyes off the road. Yeah, we notice different things now. The sound of a generator starting, a working traffic light, a bakery that's somehow still open, even hot soup. I couldn't argue with that. The smallest comforts had become the biggest victories. Around noon our radio came alive. Volunteer. Unit 3. Do you copy? Maxim reached for the microphone. Unit 3 here. We've received a request from City Hospital number 2. They're short on bottled water and backup batteries. We're closest, I said. Maxim nodded. We're on our way. The hospital parking lot looked almost empty. Only ambulances, military vehicles, and volunteer vans remained. The main entrance had been reinforced with stacks of sandbags. Several windows were covered with wooden panels. Inside, however, everything was moving. Doctors hurried through the corridors. Nurses pushed stretchers between departments. Volunteers unloaded medical supplies from every direction. There wasn't a single person standing still. A young nurse met us near the entrance. You brought the batteries. We did. And water. Her face brightened immediately. You have no idea how much we needed this. As we carried the boxes inside, I noticed how exhausted everyone looked. Dark circles under their eyes, wrinkled uniforms, coffee cups sitting on every available surface. Yet no one complained. They simply kept working. One doctor passed us, carrying a stack of patient files. He paused just long enough to say, "Thank you," then disappeared down another hallway. While Maxim finished unloading the van, I helped move supplies into a storage room. Near the doorway sat an elderly woman knitting quietly. At first, I assumed she was waiting for a family member. Then I noticed several finished pairs of wool socks folded neatly beside her. A nurse caught me looking. She's been coming here every day. Is someone from her family here? The nurse smiled softly. No, she just knits socks for anyone who needs them. I looked back at the woman. She was completely focused on her work. Loop after loop, stitch after stitch, without expecting recognition, without asking for anything in return. Before leaving, she stopped me. Young man. I turned. She handed me a pair of thick gray socks. For the cold nights. I couldn't. She interrupted gently. You'll make me happier if you take them. I accepted them with both hands. Thank you. She smiled. Take care of your feet. It's hard to help others if you can't walk. Back outside. Maxim burst into laughter as soon as I climbed into the van. What? He pointed toward the socks. You've been inside 5 minutes and already came back with gifts. I know. I don't even know how it happened. He laughed again. People around here have a strange habit. They keep giving away what little they have. As we drove away, I placed the socks beside the child's drawing and the friendship bracelet. Somehow, they all felt connected. Different objects. Same message. The afternoon passed in a blur of deliveries. A pharmacy, a community kitchen. An apartment where 3 generations now lived together after relatives from another town had evacuated. Every stop reminded us of the same thing. The city hadn't given up. People adapted. Neighbors shared food. Restaurants cooked free meals, using whatever ingredients remained. Mechanics repaired volunteer vehicles without charging a single coin. Teachers organized lessons for children inside shelters. Musicians even performed short concerts underground whenever electricity allowed. Life refused to disappear. It simply found new places to continue. As the sun began to set once again over Chernihiv, Maxim looked out through the windshield. You know, what? I don't think courage always looks the way people imagine. What do you mean? He pointed toward a woman sweeping broken glass from the sidewalk outside her apartment. I think sometimes courage is just deciding to keep living your normal life. I watched the woman finish cleaning before carrying a bucket back inside. No cameras. No applause. Just another ordinary act in an extraordinary time. And somehow. Those were the moments I knew I would remember the longest. Asterisk by the end of the week. I had stopped counting the days. Time no longer followed calendars. Instead, we measured it by deliveries completed, generators repaired, and nights without electricity. Every morning began the same way. A quick briefing. A fresh map. Another list of addresses. Then we climbed into the white van and hoped we would return before curfew. One afternoon, while organizing supplies in the coordination center, Alina walked over holding a folded notebook. I need a favor. What is it? She handed it to me. We've been writing down every family we've helped. I flipped through the pages. Names, addresses, medical needs, phone numbers that sometimes no longer work. At the very back, volunteers had begun adding short notes. Grandmother insists on sharing tea. Little boy dreams of becoming a firefighter. Apartment 18 has 3 dogs, bring extra food next time. I smiled. This wasn't on the official forms. No, Alina smiled too. But I don't want anyone to become just another number. She looked around the crowded basement. When all of this is over, I want us to remember the people. Not just the statistics. The people. Later, that afternoon, Maxim and I were sent to deliver fuel for a generator powering a neighborhood bakery. The owner met us outside before we had even parked. You actually found diesel. We got lucky. He shook both our hands. You've just saved tomorrow's bread. Inside the bakery, the smell was incredible. Fresh dough, warm flour, yeast. For a few moments, it almost felt like stepping back into the world before the war. Several employees worked quickly despite the frequent power interruptions. One young baker carried tray after tray into an old gas-powered oven. Another carefully wrapped finished loaves in paper. No one wasted movement. The owner noticed us watching. We only bake twice a day now. Enough for hospitals, the shelters, and whoever lines up outside. Do people still come? He laughed softly. They're already waiting. When we stepped back outside, nearly 40 people stood patiently along the sidewalk. Nobody pushed. Nobody complained. Everyone simply waited their turn. Some carried backpacks. Others held reusable shopping bags. One elderly man leaned on a walking stick while chatting with a teenage girl wearing headphones around her neck. Complete strangers, talking as though they'd known each other for years. As we prepared to leave, the baker ran toward the van, carrying 2 paper bags. You forgot something. We didn't order anything. I know. He placed the warm bags through the driver's window. Fresh bread. We can't accept this. You can. He smiled. Someone helped us today. Tomorrow we'll help someone else. That's how this works now. The bread was still warm. The smell filled the van almost instantly. Maxim laughed. If we keep accepting gifts, we're going to need another vehicle. That evening, instead of eating separately, the volunteers gathered around one long table made from pushed-together desks. Someone sliced the fresh bread. Someone else heated canned stew. Another volunteer found homemade pickles. Nobody asked where they came from. Everyone simply enjoyed them. For the first time since I had started volunteering, the room felt less like an emergency headquarters. And more like a family dinner. People shared stories from the day. One volunteer had helped reunite a lost dog with its owners. Another repaired an elderly woman's radio and spare parts from 3 broken ones. Someone proudly announced that electricity had briefly returned to 2 neighborhoods. The room erupted into applause, not because it was a huge victory, because every small victory mattered. As I looked around the table, I realized something. A month earlier, none of us had known each other. Different professions, different ages, different lives. Yet somehow, we had become a team. Not because anyone planned it, but because difficult times have a way of introducing you to the people you'll never forget. And although none of us knew how long the road ahead would be, we had stopped asking whether we could make it through. Instead, every morning, we simply asked one question: who needs help today? And every morning, someone answered. The following morning arrived with thick fog hanging over the city. From the coordination center's entrance, we could barely see the opposite side of the street. The silence felt unusual. Even the distant sounds of traffic had disappeared, replaced only by the low hum of generators scattered throughout the neighborhood. Maxim unlocked the van while I checked the delivery schedule. Today's list was shorter than usual, not because fewer people needed help, because supplies had become harder to find. Alina joined us carrying a clipboard. We'll have to stretch everything we have. She pointed towards several nearly empty shelves inside the basement. More aid is on the way, but it may take another day or 2. We'll make it work. Maxim replied. She smiled. I know you will. Our first stop was a community kitchen operating inside a former cultural center. Long before the war, concerts, school performances, and holiday celebrations had filled the building with music and laughter. Now, its stage had been transformed into a warehouse filled with sacks of potatoes, onions, flour, and bottled water. Behind the curtain, volunteers stirred enormous pots of soup over portable gas burners. The smell reached us before we even entered. A middle-aged woman wearing an apron greeted us with flour on her hands. Perfect timing. We're almost out of cooking oil. We unloaded the boxes one by one. Cooking oil, rice, pasta, salt, tea. As soon as the supplies were stacked against the wall, several volunteers began organizing them into neat rows. Nothing stayed in storage for long. By evening, nearly all of it would become someone's meal. Near one corner of the hall, a teenage boy quietly peeled potatoes beside an elderly man. Neither spoke much, yet they worked perfectly together. Curious, I asked one of the volunteers if they were related. She smiled. They met 3 weeks ago. They've been cooking together every day since. Sometimes friendship didn't take years. Sometimes it happened over a bucket of potatoes. Before leaving, the kitchen coordinator handed us a handwritten list. If you pass these streets today, please check on these people. The paper contained 8 addresses. Most belonged to elderly residents living alone. We've been delivering meals, she explained. But yesterday, we couldn't reach them. I folded the paper carefully. We'll stop by. The first few apartments were exactly as expected. An elderly woman who simply needed groceries. A retired bus driver whose medication had finally arrived. A couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary with nothing more than tea and 2 slices of bread. Still, they smiled as if they had received a feast. At every stop, people thanked us far more than we deserved. Truthfully, we were only carrying boxes. The real strength belonged to those who kept believing tomorrow would be better. Late in the afternoon, we reached the final address on the handwritten list. A small one-story house stood at the end of a quiet street. Smoke drifted gently from its chimney. Looks like someone's home, Maxim said. Before we could knock, the front door opened. An elderly woman stepped outside wearing a thick knitted sweater. Oh, I thought I heard a vehicle. We brought you some food, I explained. She looked at the bags for only a second before asking, have you eaten today? Maxim and I exchanged amused glances. We're fine. She crossed her arms. I wasn't asking to be polite. Without waiting for an answer, she disappeared inside. A minute later, she returned carrying a tray with fresh herbal tea and several homemade pastries. I baked these yesterday. You'll sit for 5 minutes. There was something about the way she said it that reminded me of every grandmother I'd ever known. Refusing simply wasn't an option. So, we sat together on the small wooden bench outside her house. For 10 quiet minutes, the war seemed very far away. Just warm tea, fresh pastries, and a woman who insisted that 2 tired volunteers deserved a short rest before continuing their journey. Sometimes, kindness didn't arrive in large heroic moments. Sometimes, it came served with a warm cup of tea. We thanked the elderly woman several times before finally standing up to leave. She walked us to the gate, adjusting the scarf around her shoulders as a cool breeze swept through the quiet street. Come back when all of this is over, she said. I'll bake a proper dinner next time. Maxim smiled. We'll hold you to that. I expect you to. As we climbed into the van, she waved until we disappeared around the corner. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, Maxim broke the silence. You know what I've realized? What? Almost everyone we've met keeps talking about the future. I thought about it. The bakery owner. The history teacher. The little boy in the shelter. The grandmother who promised another meal after the war. They do. They're already planning for life afterward. He nodded. I think that's how people survive. The afternoon slowly turned into evening. Golden sunlight reflected off apartment windows that had somehow survived the past several weeks. Children were playing quietly in a small courtyard while their parents watched from nearby benches. Someone had brought out a football. For 15 minutes, laughter replaced the distant sound of artillery. It wasn't that people had forgotten what was happening. They simply refused to let fear occupy every single minute of their lives. As we drove past, one little boy kicked the ball a little too hard. It rolled directly into the road. Without hesitation, Maxim stopped the van. The boy ran over, picked up the ball, and looked slightly embarrassed. Sorry. No problem, Maxim replied. The child noticed the volunteer badge hanging from the dashboard. Were you bringing food? We were. He smiled proudly. My dad helps too. I'm sure he's doing important work. The boy nodded. He says everyone has a job now. Before running back to his friends, he added one last sentence. When I grow up, I want to help people too. Back at the coordination center, another truck had arrived during our absence. Volunteers formed a long line from the loading area into the basement. Nobody shouted instructions. Everyone already knew what to do. One person unloaded. The next sorted supplies. Another updated inventory. Someone checked expiration dates. Boxes moved from hand to hand almost like water flowing through a river. Within half an hour, the truck stood empty. Alina looked around the room with quiet satisfaction. I wish people could see this. What do you mean? I asked. She smiled. They hear stories about destruction. They rarely hear stories about cooperation. She pointed toward the volunteers. Look around. A programmer, a firefighter, a music teacher, a retired accountant, a university student. Different lives, one purpose. I followed her gaze. She was right. None of these people had been trained for this. Yet somehow, they had built an entire support network almost overnight. Not because someone ordered them to, because someone needed help. Later, that evening, we finally had a few quiet minutes. Maxim sat on an old wooden crate, absent-mindedly spinning the blue and yellow bracelet around his wrist. Do you think we'll ever forget these days? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached into my backpack. Inside were the things I had collected over the past week. The child's drawing, the knitted socks. The friendship bracelet, the folded city map. A handwritten thank you note someone had slipped into one of the supply boxes. None of them had any real monetary value. Yet together, they had become more precious than anything I owned. I don't think we'll forget, I finally said. I think one day these will remind us that even during the hardest days, people never stopped caring for one another. Maxim smiled. I hope someday kids learn about this in school, not because of the war, but because of the people. Outside, another volunteer started the generator. The lights flickered once before glowing steadily throughout the basement. Someone announced that fresh tea was ready. Several tired voices immediately cheered. It wasn't much. Just another ordinary evening. But after everything we'd seen. Ordinary moments had become the greatest gift of all. The next few days passed in much the same way. Morning briefings, delivery routes. Heavy boxes, late-night conversations over cups of tea. No one asked how long they could keep going anymore. Instead, everyone simply woke up and did what needed to be done. That became enough. One afternoon, while returning from another delivery, Maxim suddenly slowed the van. Look over there, across the street. Several neighbors were repairing the entrance to an apartment building. One man balanced on a ladder, replacing broken wooden boards. Two women swept away shattered glass. A teenager painted over damaged walls. Nearby, children carefully planted small yellow flowers in an old concrete flower bed. The building still carried the scars of recent shelling. Yet, the people living there had already begun rebuilding. Not someday. Today. We parked for a moment to watch. An elderly resident noticed us. Need a hand? He asked with a grin. I think you've got everything under control, Maxim replied. The man laughed. We're trying. One step at a time. As we continued driving, those words stayed with me. One step at a time. That seemed to describe the entire city. Nobody expected life to return overnight. People simply focused on the next task, the next meal, the next repair. The next delivery. Little by little. Those small steps added up. That evening, the Coordination Center received wonderful news. A humanitarian convoy carrying additional medical supplies and food had successfully reached the city. The basement erupted into applause. Some volunteers hugged each other. Others immediately began preparing storage space. Alina stood on a chair so everyone could hear her. Tomorrow, we'll be busy. A few tired groans filled the room. She laughed. I know, but busy is good. Busy meant supplies. Busy meant families would eat. Busy meant hospitals could continue working. No one complained after that. The following morning, dozens of volunteers gathered before sunrise. Some directed traffic, others unloaded trucks. Students carried sacks of flour almost as large as themselves. Mechanics repaired damaged pallets. Doctors sorted medical equipment. Within hours, the empty basement had transformed into a carefully organized warehouse. Every box received a label. Every medicine was counted. Every destination carefully recorded. Watching everyone work together reminded me of something Mikola, the retired history teacher, had told us. Knowledge should always be shared. Looking around the room, I realized another lesson had emerged during those difficult weeks. Kindness worked the same way. The more people shared it. The stronger an entire community became. Late that afternoon, Maxim walked over holding two steaming cups of tea. I've been thinking about what? He looked around at the dozens of volunteers filling boxes for tomorrow's deliveries. When the war is finally over double quotes, what do you think everyone here will do? I smiled. The teacher will go back to teaching. The mechanic will repair cars. The students will return to university. The baker will bake. And you? He asked. I looked at the coordination center. At the shelves. At the maps covered in handwritten notes. At the people who had become friends. I don't know. But I hope we never forget what we learned here. What lesson? That complete strangers can become family. Double quotes, simply because they choose to help one another. Maxim nodded. I hope we remember that part forever. Years from now, many people will remember the headlines. The dates, the maps. The news reports. But when I think back to those first months of 2022, I don't remember statistics. I remember a little girl giving away handmade bracelets. An elderly woman insisting we stop for tea. Fresh bread still warm from the oven. A history teacher sharing his handwritten map. Volunteers carrying boxes long after they were exhausted. Neighbors clearing roads together. Children drawing pictures of peaceful skies. Those moments never appeared on television. Yet they became the moments that defined the city. Because even during one of the hardest chapters in our history, people refused to lose something far more valuable than buildings or streets. They refused to lose their humanity. And in the end, that was what carried us forward.